Hello and welcome to the fourth of our audiocasts. This one is titled, How to Harness the Power of Culture to Drive Change. My name is Tim Sweeten. I am the Perioperative Division Lead for Consulting Services at Accelero Health Partners. Today with me is Senior Product Lead Michael May. He is a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and is responsible for conducting assessments and implementing projects both here in the U.S. as well as abroad in Europe. So you can dedicate your entire professional life to understanding the psychology and organizational inputs and outputs of culture change. And indeed, some people have done that. The number of words dedicated to this subject alone is uncountable. What we want to do today is to give some very simple yet powerful steps that you can use in your organization right now to move towards a culture of responsibility and performance. So a couple of things that come to mind as we talk about this subject. Organizational culture affects the speed, efficacy, and sustainability of change. Whether we like to acknowledge it or not, our organizations have cultures of their own. And it's important to recognize that you don't change a culture, but the culture changes itself.
You know, Tim, John Shook, Chairman and CEO of the Lean Enterprise Institute, says it's easier to act your way to a new way of thinking than to think your way to a new way of acting.
I completely agree with that. So let's talk about the problem, or should I say the perceived problem. Everyone seems to want things to change in their organization, so why doesn't it happen?
You know, Tim, in conversations with administrators, surgeons, or OR managers, they'll say something to me like, I'd love to implement change, but my fill in the blank won't work with me. Now, that could be surgeons, nurses, the union, anesthesia, whomever. What I tell them is they already have everything they need to get started. One person who wants to see change. That's all it takes, and we can provide the roadmap from there.
Yes, absolutely. So let me start off with a backdrop. I think Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Tipping Point, outlined the steps to change very well. He said the first step is a temporary system is put into place to start the change process. It's important to choose a subsystem with early adopters who are open to trying new things, experiment, keep what works, eliminate what does not work. Second step is the temporary system expands as new people enter that system, or you take the results of that experiment into other areas. The temporary system continues to expand until the critical mass causes the system to tip over to culture change. Lastly, the temporary system becomes the new norm for the entire system.
Yeah, Tim, at a hospital, this can take the form of two things, really, an infrastructure and hardwired goals. Now, an effective infrastructure, it needs to have these elements to it. One, you need to have all the stakeholders at the table, especially the surgeons. Two, it's what we call a 30-day rule, and it's a minimum requirement that decisions are implemented in 30 days. Three, clear analysis and agreement as to the important metrics. The decisions have to be driven by data. So, for example, if room turnovers are 40 minutes, then let's show that to everyone. Let's agree what they are, and then let's agree on what they should be. This is going to allow us to start doing really the next thing, which is problem solving. And that's where the work is done. I mentioned hardwired goals. So taking that example of a 40-minute room turnover, if we know that's what it is, and then we can agree the goal should be 20 minutes, that's how we begin to hardwire goals.
That's a perfect example, Mike. So let's talk about getting results. We like to look at it in a 5-step process to hardwiring improvements. Those 5 steps are, number 1, pick a team with the people who are actually doing the work. Observe and record the current process. And when I say record, I mean take a video camera and actually record what's going on. The next step, review that recording, and I should point out the entire team will review that recording and look at the current processes as a group. It's sort of like looking at a game film to look for areas of opportunity that a sports team might do. The next step, analyze for improvement and collectively create standard work processes or a future state. Next, you want to create controls and standards to ensure compliance. And lastly, you want to have a consistent reporting of metrics. So that's our 5-step process to working within a subsystem and getting results. So I want to take a minute or two to talk about breaking that down into a few steps so our listeners, you can visualize how this might work in your organization. So first, pinpoint the subsystem that needs changing. This could be a patient care area like patient flow through the pre-op area. Next, identify the right team to adopt the changes and be on the team. These should be stakeholders who are most open to change. Now, as a side note, this could, but not always, include your most vocal complainers. Remember that we want this entire experience to be positive and successful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. My experience is sometimes you want a mix of positive as well as negative complainers.
Perfect. Next, you want to set up the change as an experiment or a pilot. The word experiment has the connotation of learning, and it makes it safe for people to try new things, which is very important. Make their work visual, so as people are working on things, ensure that it's written big and is able to be viewed by lots of people. Studies show that when people work by drawing out on a whiteboard, writing on paper, post-it notes, what have you, when they're mapping something out, it increases the shared learning and creative thinking by the entire group, which is obviously what you want. Next, when the implementation happens, you want to implement with fanfare. It's not quiet. It can't go unnoticed. When the change goes into effect, don't let this happen in a vacuum. The next and last step is quantify the results of that change and celebrate. Let the people who are on the team, let them own the successes.
Yeah, a great example of where this worked well was recently we worked at a hospital in the Southwest that faced an operational problem, but it was also a cultural problem. In a nutshell, their flip rooms were being decided really on the fly. And the criteria was that whatever case finished first would get to flip into the next available OR. Now, as you can imagine, this led to a lot of problems. There were frequent misunderstandings, arguments, there was tension, confusion around what should have happened and what actually happened. We implemented a multidisciplinary planning meeting. This happened every week to plan for the following week. It was during this meeting that the cases were reviewed, resources allocated, and this is where the surgeons felt more comfortable deciding the flip room criteria or the parallel rooms. Further, as the case order was being decided at this time, this allowed the joint coordinator to call the patients and give them an accurate time for their arrival on their day of surgery. He was actually doing this the day prior to their surgery, and this had a huge impact on patient satisfaction. All these changes were rolled out step by step with clear and frequent communication among all the stakeholders. In the end, they fixed their operational problem, but they also fixed their cultural problem.
Well, that's an excellent example, Mike. Thank you. So, in summary, you want to have the right infrastructure in place to support the changes that you're making. 2, you want to pick the right people to be on the team, and I can't stress enough, this must include the people who are actually doing the work. Next, use the 5-step workflow improvement process we outlined a few moments ago. That includes the recording of the process, the team watching the recording, coming up with the new processes on their own. Next, when implementing the new process, treat it like an experiment or a pilot before taking it out to the entire system. Then you want to celebrate the success and monitor to ensure that the results are sustained. So in closing, I want to thank Mike May for joining me today and talking about this important subject. If you have any questions or would like to discuss your perioperative services situation, please reach out to your local Zimmer Biomet representative, and they will be able to set up a conversation with Mike or myself. The other way to reach us is by visiting our website, and that's www.accelerohealth.com. Thanks again for listening.